Starting this hour with new information on the shooting at a security checkpoint outside of the White House. Sources say the gunman who opened fire just outside the White House complex last night has been identified as the 21-year-old Nazir Best. Secret Service officers shot Best in the exchange of gunfire, and he was taken to a hospital where he later died, according to the agency. A bystander was also shot and wounded during the incident, but it remains unclear whether the bystander was struck by the gunman or an officer. Sources say Best had a history of mental illness and had previous run-ins with the Secret Service. In response to the shooting, President Trump shared a post on social media arguing that the incident, quote, goes to show how important it is for all future presidents to get what will be the most safe and secure space of its kind ever built in Washington, D.C. That's likely a reference to his White House ballroom, which is supposed to include enhanced security features. That ballroom is just one of many personal projects Trump has been focused on, including building a triumphal arch, renovating the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool, and turning the White House South Lawn into a temporary UFC cage fighting arena. On top of being laser-focused on funding his interior decor projects or exterior, the president is also championing a $1.8 billion so-called anti-weaponization compensation fund that could give money to January 6th insurrectionists. But all of this seems at odds with voters who are struggling in Trump's economy and asking, where is the relief for them? Here's what some voters told MS Now reporter Alex Tabbitt this week.
So we are seeing $4.09 a gallon at this station.
Ridiculous. It's too high. It's too high. I mean, it's like you got to balance between eating or you need gas. You got to go to work.
Just seems like every day. Used to be like every year, but every day there's some type of additional costs creeping up. And now they're talking about this weaponization fund. Why would we give them some kind of fund to help them along when other Americans are starving and other Americans are going through the cost of living the way they are?
Joining us now is Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Dingell of Michigan. Congresswoman, thanks for joining us on set this morning. How much are those kinds of conversations that we just heard from voters playing into the conversations you're having with your colleagues about messaging for November?
Well, I think if anybody's home and going to the gas station or the grocery store or farmers markets or union halls, that's what they're hearing. And I think for people have been upset. They've been upset about the cost of living, but they didn't understand how tariffs maybe were affecting them because it's hard to see what tariffs have done to costs. The increase in gasoline costs have impacted every person who drives a car. They feel it. In Michigan, it's been 3 weeks since gasoline went over $5 a gallon. People are upset. They're ticked. They're scared. And I go to Kroger when I'm home. My Diet Coke bottles, return them regularly. People come up and show me. Look how much this is. Or even I was in a UAW hall last week, and the man said, all I want to do, and we're not talking the steakhouses here in Washington, D.C. We're talking Kroger beef. He said, I want to be able to barbecue a steak. I can't afford it. Once a month, that's all I want. People are hurting.
People have the bar very low of what they want to live. They just want to be able to live their lives. And I think the thing that's so interesting about the folks that Alex talked to is that sometimes voters, it feels like as a reporter when you're talking to them, they're not connecting the dots about who to blame, right? Like it's like this thing is happening. I kind of know it's happening. But what we're hearing from voters is they're looking at what's happened with Iran. They're like, Trump is to blame here for the gas going up, right? And then they're saying, you're giving the weaponization money to these people who attacked you on January 6th, attacked this country, and yet I'm getting no help. Like they're able to connect the dots with someone to blame. And I'm curious how you, as the chair of the House Democratic Policy and Communications Committee, how you and your team are talking about how to utilize all of this, because it feels like every single day Donald Trump is giving Democrats a lot to run on. But how do you get that message to break through? Well,
I think we're very focused on one. We got to stay united, not always our strength, but I think people understand that that's what we've got to do. And we're talking, I think affordability is becoming a tired word too, but we are talking about the war in Iran. We're talking about this. I have never seen people so angry, and they should be, about this slush fund that he was going to use. You're going to pay people that were convicted of attacking policemen, and now you're going to give them compensation. They're like, I hurt. Who's helping me? But we're going to talk about affordability. We are talking about affordability, from groceries to utilities to housing to caregiving to health care. Health care is a big issue in this country. And while they tried to time the big, I'm on television, I won't use the word I want, Bill.
I mean, feel free.
No, I don't want to get in trouble with the FCC. Or you to get in trouble with the FCC, because they're always after you.
Oh, with Jesus, it's also Sunday.
It is. I'm a good Catholic girl, but the Archbishop heard me use this word. But they tried to time it so the health care things wouldn't go into effect until after the election. They're starting to feel it.
Yeah.
People are scared. They can't afford the medicine. They're not going to the doctor because they don't have affordable care. The emergency rooms, the boarding is getting worse. And we all have to talk about it and tie it to why is it happening? Because of the war, the big bad bill.
You know what President Trump is supposed to be talking about. If you listen to his chief of staff and folks in his administration, he's supposed to be talking about the economy. And he even went to Suffern, New York, to the district of Republican Congressman Mike Lawler to talk about the economy, Congresswoman Dingell. But listen to what he actually talked about.
The Democrats voted for open borders. They voted for open borders. And if they get in, you're going to have open borders again. You're going to have millions of people coming in. When we talk about men playing in women's sports, I'll tell you how ridiculous it is. You had one candidate named Sleepy Joe Biden. What's a better name? Sleepy Joe Biden or Crooked Joe Biden? Ready? Who likes Sleepy Joe Biden? Who likes Crooked Joe Biden? About pretty similar. They're both pretty good.
Congresswoman, we've just spent the beginning of this conversation and just for weeks now talking about high gas prices, high everything, affordability, and yet he is talking about all of these other things. I wonder, in Michigan, are Michiganders talking about Joe Biden? Are they talking about open borders? Are they talking about immigration?
So I
in the
want to
way
say
he's
this.
talking
No,
about
they're not. And by the way, not only are they not talking about it, he says he doesn't think about people. He doesn't care about people. The cost of stuff.
Peanuts.
It's peanuts.
It's peanuts. But, you know, this isn't the same Donald Trump that got elected in 2016. When he got elected in 2016, I said he was going to get elected because you all thought I was crazy. But I was in those union halls, and he understood bad trade deals. He understood that workers are seeing their jobs shipped overseas. He understood that anxiety, and he played to it. His just total callousness, total lack of understanding how people across this country are hurting, really hurting, trying to make ends meet. They're worried about their jobs. They're worried about the kids. Kids that are graduating can't find jobs. Parents can't afford to send their kids to college. People can't afford to go to the doctor or pay for the medicine, and we have shortages of medicine. And he's not talking about those kitchen table issues that matter to people every single day and keep them up at night scared.
Unburdened by a second term, potentially. But let's talk about some of your Republican colleagues. You talk to Republicans. You have Republican friends.
They're friends.
Let's actually listen to Bill Cassidy quickly, who slammed this week after losing his primary election, Trump's proposed ballroom. It's a full screen, actually. He said, when I go back to Louisiana and I talk to people, this is not. I mean, they can't afford groceries and gasoline and health care, and we're going to do $1 billion for a ballroom. There were also other Republicans who had various clips on talking about the anti-weaponization fund and their displeasure with that. Is this the breaking point? We have had this moment many other times at this table with you. Is next week the week that they're finally going to, really put an end to Donald Trump's reconciliation package, take a stand, find their backbone, or are we stuck?
I'm going to be honest. I think the Senate, the House is always mad at the Senate. There's been, I want to say, House Republicans and the Senate Republicans are mad at each other. I hope that we did see the breaking point on Thursday. I was stunned. I thought for sure we were going to be voting on all of us because Donald Trump wants that by June 1. Republicans you're seeing more Republicans. People don't understand how much you get attacked when you cross Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And I think, I've seen more. One of my colleagues from Michigan, Republican, actually voted for the War Powers Act. Remember, they pulled the War Powers Act on Thursday, too, because they did not have the votes. And they will not have the votes when they come back. I don't know if it's the breaking point. We're going to have to see. I think there is a fear of Donald Trump by many Republicans, and I hope they will find what their constituents want, and remember the responsibility is to their constituents.
And to a broader point, because people think that, when members of Republicans cross the president, they get attacked. They figure that, they're getting attacked by the president. But it's the president's supporters who attack them via phone, via social media.
In person.
And by the way,
that is
violence. I mean, people do not understand. I've been there. What happens when Donald Trump goes after you in the tunnel of hate you find yourself in?
Tunnel of hate. Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, it is always great to have you on the show, and especially on set. Thank you for coming back.
It's great to see you three. And I'm off to Michigan in Memorial Day parade.
All right.
Have a safe flight.
Let's begin, though, with MS Now White House reporter Jake Traylor. Jake, what are you hearing from the White House today about what this potential deal could look like?
Yeah, Britt, new this hour, the Iran agreement between the United States and Iran will not be signed today. That's according to a senior administration official. And, Britt, that comes as there's been a lot of details swirling around about this, what they're referring to as a memorandum of understanding between the U.S. and Iran. And there's a lot of key details and sticking points that are actively being talked through between the two countries right now. I want to just tick through a couple of those. First and foremost, that includes the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. That is something the United States has worked to have reopened for months now. That also includes an ending of hostilities between the U.S. and Iran. The timeline for that is still very up in the air. An unfreezing of certain Iranian assets, as well as, and the real underpin here, is the negotiations to curb Iran's nuclear program. That's the thing that Trump has repeatedly said. A deal cannot be signed unless it is certified that Iran is not able to, in the future, pursue any type of nuclear weapon. The president yesterday and this morning made it sound as though a deal was very, very close. He's had a bit more measure in his latest Truth Social post that came out just a bit ago, where he said that the negotiations are proceeding in an orderly and constructive manner, and I have informed my representatives not to rush into a deal and that time is on our side. He goes on to say that both sides must take their time and get it just right. So a bit more measure there from President Trump as he makes it sound a little bit less like that deal is coming imminently. Also, that senior administration official saying it will not be coming today. But Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, is in India, was giving a tease to what the potential success of a deal could look like. Take a listen to what he had to say.
There'll be, I believe, maybe more news coming out a little bit later today on this topic, and I'll leave it to the president to make further announcements on it. Suffice it to say that some progress has been made, significant progress, although not final progress has been made. So we think we've made some progress on the outline of something that, if it works, could give us that outcome. Obviously, that will require full Iranian acceptance and then compliance, and it will require some future work on negotiating the details.
Now, the president's tamped down rhetoric about how close a deal actually is to being reached here comes as there have been some of Trump's top Republican allies that have been really critical of the deals that have been being floated. Some really critical comments from critical Republicans, such as Senator Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, Roger Wicker, former Secretary of State to Trump, Mike Pompeo, former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, all advising President Trump to not sign any deal unless it is ensured that Iran is rendered useless of their nuclear capabilities. Trump continues to say that is the main goal here, Britt.
All right. Thank you for those insights, Jake Traylor. Let's move on now to MS Now contributor Inzamam Rashid in Dubai. Inzamam, we heard what the U.S. is saying from Jake just now, about the terms of this proposed framework. Are the Iranians on the same page right now? I mean, what are you hearing?
Yeah, it's interesting that President Trump, or at least the White House, has now advised us that there will not be a deal signed today. And as Jake was mentioning, that kind of rhetoric from the president now being toned down heavily, saying that talks are going well. but we should take time to ensure that there are no mistakes made in this deal. Look, the rhetoric from the Iranians has also been pretty measured as well, I think, over the last 24 to 48 hours. And I think that gives me an indication is that we are probably closer to actually a deal getting over the line than we ever have been before. I know many of our viewers will be rolling their eyes, probably thinking, well, we've been here before, we've been down this lane many, many times. But this time it does seem a little bit different, and that's because of the language from both the sides, but also because of President Trump's involvement with the Gulf states here in the UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, getting them involved and keeping them up to date as to what a potential final deal looks like, I think is a very important step, because that signals that President Trump wants to get this over the line, and he wants to do so with the support, with the green light from the Gulf states, because any conclusive ending to this conflict will be incredibly important to include those states as well. So right now we're at a situation where, yes, we're watching and waiting to see whether the negotiators can actually come to some agreement. But clearly today, there is a sticking point right now, which means that a deal isn't being signed. And whether that is specifically around the Strait of Hormuz, whether Iran is still saying that they want to implement tolls in the Strait of Hormuz, or whether they want control over that waterway, is a big question mark, or whether this is around Iran's nuclear program, and whether actually discussions around their nuclear program, around enriching uranium, remains on the table yet or not. You've got to remember, Britt, as well, is that this framework is actually just to get the two sides once again in the room to have a second round of peace talks. And it's basically what will base those talks around. So this isn't a final be-all and end-all of the agreement. This doesn't mean that once it's signed and the war is over, the bombing stops and things get back to normal. This is just the first step initially to have those conversations within the two sides, within the same room. And I think that's an important step. Finally, if I may, Britt, I think what will give us a real signal that things are coming to an end, that things are quieting down, that actually we are getting out of this conflict, is when Israel stops its bombing inside of Lebanon and Hezbollah, in response, stops targeting Israeli officials and the IDF as well. That's because right now that is very much continuing. Benjamin Netanyahu is clear that he will continue to do so as long as this conflict continues. Once that dies down, I think then we get into the serious idea that we are getting an ending to this conflict. Right now that's continuing, and so too is the diplomacy to get a deal out of this war. Britt.
Very important points made there. Inzamam Rashid, thank you, from Dubai today. I want to bring some more players into this conversation right now. Joining me is Hugo Lowell. He is in studio with me right now. He's a senior politics correspondent with Wired and author of the Inner Loop newsletter. Also joining us remotely, Joel Rubin, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, now president of Washington Strategy Group. His new book, in fact, is titled Saving Democratic Foreign Policy. Thank you to you both for being here on this fine Sunday. Joel, let's kick things off with you. Speaker Mike Johnson tweeted, Trump is the only person who could have gotten Iran to the negotiating table. Obviously, though, we know President Obama signed a nuclear deal back in 2015, and your job back then actually was to sell this deal to Congress. But at this point, does it seem like the U.S. has really expanded, or expended, I should say, blood and treasure for little benefit? I mean, there's no regime change right now. There's no definitive nuclear deal, and new uncertainty in the Strait of Hormuz at this hour. So what has the president really accomplished after 86 days of war and $25 to $50 billion in military spending?
Yeah, Brett, President Trump is in a diplomatic and political quagmire of his own making. Look, he basically started this process going in the wrong direction in 2018 when he exited the Iran nuclear deal. And the whole idea of the recent action was to try to compel Iran to get into a deal that would terminate its enrichment, its nuclear program for good. Of course, it was set back militarily last June in those strikes. And then, of course, to also deal with other issues like Inzamam is talking about related to regional proxies and Lebanon and the like. But we don't have any of that right now. And it's really humiliating from an American perspective to see the president daily putting out how we're close to a deal, and then there's no deal. And then maybe if there is a deal, it's going to be a short-term arrangement. Process-wise, I think that's actually the right approach, a short-term arrangement to get to a fuller negotiation. But it's not where President Trump said he wanted this to end. So to your question, no, we're not better off. We don't really have clarity about where Iran wants to go. If anything, we now see the Iranians more motivated to maintain their power. They are weaker militarily and on the nuclear file, but we are not better off right now diplomatically, and we don't have any firm guarantees that they won't restart their nuclear program going forward.
Yeah, uncertainty has been one of the main themes over the past 86 days. Hugo, I want to sort of give some context to what we're seeing and experiencing right now. You know, this is all coming after a pretty bad week for the president, with poll numbers hitting a new low, gas prices the highest we've seen really in 4 years. I mean, is the president feeling pressure to agree to a deal, even if he doesn't get everything on his wish list?
I mean, certainly Republicans in Congress are pressuring the president to get out of the Iran war. But I also think, you know, President Trump himself is trying to get out of the Iran war. He has become very bored of the fact that there is nothing happening. He is, I think, frustrated at the fact that things have not really moved since the start of the ceasefire. I mean, if you look at the Memorandum of Understanding as we currently understand it, the top lines are very, very vague. The one concrete thing we get out of this is that the Strait of Hormuz is reopened without tolls in exchange for the U.S. lifting the blockade. That's where we were pre-war. So the status is right where we were before Trump even started bombing Iran. And on the more substantive issue, I think, as Joel said, of, you know, what do we do about the highly enriched uranium? Well, the only thing that the U.S. is getting out of this MOU is Iran saying, well, we commit to giving up our enriched uranium. No discussion about the mechanisms, because, by the way, the enriched uranium is still buried under rubble at Fordo. And Iran has previously said there's no way we're giving it directly to the Americans. So all of the difficult issues are getting punted down the line. But I think the fact that we are seeing this MOU come together is because the president wants to get out of Iran.
The Democratic National Committee is in a PR crisis of its own making. After months of pressure to release its autopsy report on the 2024 presidential election, which DNC Chair Ken Martin initially refused to make public, the DNC finally released what it says is the full, unredacted report this week. But it has left us all with more questions than answers. Our friend and colleague Eugene Daniels highlighted some major omissions from the report, writing, quote, "No Israel, no Gaza, no mention of President Joe Biden's age, unpopularity, or his decision to run again." Meantime, Martin writes that he's, quote, "not proud of this product. It does not meet my standards, and it won't meet your standards." Now, there are growing calls inside the party for Martin to resign, as some Democrats are anxious for new leadership ahead of the November midterms. And joining us now is David Hogg, former DNC vice chair. He's also the president of Leaders We Deserve and the co-founder of March for Our Lives. And if you remember, last summer, Politico obtained audio where Ken Martin expressed frustration over his ability to lead the DNC because of infighting with Hogg. David, it's good to have you back on the show. So I guess let's start with what I kind of just laid out there. No mention of Gaza. No mention of Palestinian people. No mention of the protests at the DNC. No mention of Israel. No mention of Benjamin Netanyahu. No mention of Joe Biden's age. They even didn't really mention inflation as an issue for voters, only really in regards to campaign fundraising and spending. It was shocking to me. And then there are entire sections where it just says no conclusion provided. I mean, were you as surprised? I mean, I guess you know some of the infighting and the challenges that have been going on inside the DNC. So were you surprised or no?
You know, I never expected to agree with all of it, but I have to be honest with you. It is stunning to me that this would ever be released in its incomplete form in the way it was done. And not just to announce that they're going to do they're going to redo it, that it wasn't up to par in the first place. Because, you know, what's crazy about this is that this is exactly what Ken Martin ran on. And I thought it was a great idea, right? Releasing an autopsy to tell people what happened in this election. He ran on this and ran on releasing it. Then had his friend put together this report, who had not really, from my understanding, worked in politics since Bill Clinton was elected back before I was alive. And then didn't even include a conclusion, barely proofread this document. And the sheer amount of incompetence that was required for it to get to this point, where if you turn this in as a high schooler, you wouldn't get a passing grade. The fact that we're presenting this to the American people is an astonishing failure in the first place. Not to mention that there's, as you said, zero discussion about Gaza, zero discussion about inflation, zero discussion about the president's age. All things that I know people were bringing up when we were talking inside of the DNC about this report. I remember in our first meeting going over some of the results of the election and talking about, well, what should we talk about in this autopsy, and saying, I know you guys don't want to talk about this almost certainly, but if you're going to talk about young voters, you have to talk about what they were all protesting over on many college campuses around the country, which was Gaza. And to my surprise, they all said, oh, we absolutely should talk about that. David, you're totally right. We really should. Like, you're not wrong. And of course, they either were too scared or too incompetent to end up talking about it or including it in the first place. It is astonishing. This was our chance to show the American people that the Democratic Party is taking a turn and holding itself accountable finally after a historic loss, and we completely fumbled it. And it's time for Ken Martin to resign.
So I was going to ask you about that point that you made, because I have to admit, and I'm going to be one of these people who thought, obviously on a personal level, just thought Gaza was a very important issue for the Democrats. And I initially thought one of the reasons why they didn't want to release the autopsy was they're going to find something very damning about Gaza, that Gaza was a central issue. But I have to say, having seen this report, I kind of feel that the issue is not even about Gaza. It's about pure incompetence, because as you mentioned, and as Antonio was saying, so many other factors were not mentioned. The quality of the report was not that good. There's not a lot of fact-based findings in there. There's not a lot of analysis. There's not a lot of depth to it. That I even think trying to make this about Gaza deflects from the incompetence of the DNC in this current moment. And that's what's actually frightening me more going into the midterms. Not so much about what was left out or what was mentioned, but to your point about the fact that this is the biggest example of incompetence by the DNC, and the fact that they sat on it so long and said they weren't going to release it just added more fuel to the fire, added more speculation, has created more of a frenzy around it, when this should have just been, nixed very early on and said it didn't meet our standards. We're going to try to do another one. We're going to try to do a better autopsy that is fact-based.
Right. And the fact of the matter is here, we could have this is a huge opportunity for our party to turn a corner and show people we are actually going to hold ourselves accountable, right? Ken came together and said that he was going to release this. He ran on this. This wasn't a surprise. This wasn't forced on him. And he could have put together some kind of group of experts, an impartial group of experts, to go and interview people, to look at the polling, look at the data, talk to the campaign operatives, talk to the fundraisers, and put together a report, kind of like's done after a plane crash, of impartial people that could actually say, okay, this is what actually happened here, and here's what we're going to do differently next time. And the fact that the reason it appears to me that this report was not released wasn't because there was some kind of crazy cover-up, but more than anything, as you said, it was just sheer incompetence. Yeah. Frankly, is even more concerning, because no matter if you agree that you think that Gaza had a huge role to play in the election, or you think that it didn't, I personally think it had a major role, along with things like inflation, along with things like the president's age. But either way, no matter where you come at it, it is unacceptable to have somebody that is the head of our opposition party, that is supposed to be the person fighting back against Donald Trump, fixing our brand and showing people that we are the better people to vote for, not even be able to put together a report that he himself ran on releasing in the first place.
David, one other piece of incompetence here that I'd love for you to weigh in on is the timing of the release of this chicken scratch report. Because as we've been talking about on this show tonight, this has been like a corruption palooza of bad headlines for Donald Trump this week. It's hard to even keep track of all of the things that have happened this week in terms of, dodgy trades and in both oil market, stock trading, everything else, the $1.8 billion, settlement fund. I kind of wonder what you make of the timing of this release, because it feels a little bit like the party stepped on a pretty bad news cycle for Donald Trump.
I think there's your answer, Catherine.
Yeah. Is there much else to say? It is incompetence on top of incompetence on top of incompetence. If you're a moderate Democrat, to whether or not you're a progressive, Zoran supporter like myself, incompetence should be something we all can agree on is unacceptable here. Our party has the chance to present to the American people that we are the party of competence, good governance, and integrity, not being incredibly corrupt. It would have been so easy for us to go out there this same week had we had a good autopsy put together that, for example, said, the fact that Mike Donilon got paid $4 million to lose an election and now the DNC is $3 million in debt is something that maybe we should talk about, right? While also saying, look, we're the party that stands against Citizens United. That's why I do the work I do at Leaders We Deserve, to help elect better young people that don't take corporate money, to give my generation a sense of hope that there at least is a segment of Democrats who actually don't take money from the same special interests that are ruining their lives. And I'll tell you right now, one of the things that we need to really reckon with as a party, and I have conversations about this on, as a person that works on the inside of politics and somebody who antagonizes it from the outside at the same time. I kind of cross both worlds in a weird way. It is fascinating to me the number of conversations that I have had in this town with many establishment Democrats who insist we have to take corporate money over and over and over again because Republicans are taking. Look, we outraised Donald Trump and still lost the election. I think we outraised him by $500 million. On top of that, maybe we wouldn't have to spend so much money defending our candidates and their decisions if we voted for better policies, because we weren't in bed with these corporations constantly. And we could present to the American people, hey, we actually are not just saying we need to go and overturn Citizens United. We're actively working within our own party to reject the influence of corporate money so that we properly represent you and not the data center getting built in your backyard, not the private equity firm coming and buying up your neighborhood.
Yeah, very important point there, David. Great to have you on the show. Really appreciate your insights as always. Thank you.
We love doing this show for you, but what we really, really love is doing the show with you. Now, I'll say to you what I've said to every audience for the last 11 years, and I have meant it every time. Have a good show. Thanks for being here. And let's do it, y'all.
Late Show's final broadcast on Thursday didn't just mark the end of an era for Stephen Colbert and late-night television, but a shift in the broader media landscape. When CBS announced the show's cancellation last July, it framed it as, quote, purely a financial decision against a challenging backdrop in late night. But not only did the Late Show's finale draw 6.74 million viewers, making it the most watched weeknight episode in Colbert's 11-year tenure, it was already the #1 rated show in late night for 9 straight seasons. The announcement of the show's cancellation came just days after Colbert, while on the air, called out CBS's parent company, Paramount Global, for paying out a $16 million settlement with Donald Trump, who alleged a 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris was deceptively edited. It's important to note Paramount has been seeking federal government approval for a deal on a merger, and the very next month, Paramount and Skydance Media completed their $8 billion merger with federal approval. Trump ally, campaign donor, and billionaire tech mogul Larry Ellison played a major part in the deal, and his son David, who was already the CEO of Skydance, became the CEO of the new combined company. But here's the thing. This isn't just about CBS. Last year, when CBS announced it was canceling The Late Show, Trump posted on social media, quote, I absolutely love that Colbert got fired. His talent was even less than his ratings. I hear Jimmy Kimmel is next. Then on Friday, a day after The Late Show's final episode, Donald Trump posted an AI-generated video of himself throwing Colbert into a dumpster and then dancing to YMCA. But it was a post on Friday by Donald Trump that really underscores the moment we're in. In it, he declared Colbert's firing was, quote, the beginning of the end for late-night television hosts, and warned, quote, others of even less talent to soon follow. May they all rest in peace. Anyone, especially late-night comedians who's critical of the president, can be next. Remember, just last month, Trump called for ABC's Jimmy Kimmel to be fired after a monologue that included a joke about the First Lady. A day later, Trump's FCC took the unprecedented step to order early license reviews years ahead of schedule for all 8 of ABC's owned stations, including in major markets like New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago. The FCC chairman, Brendan Carr, denied that it had anything to do with Kimmel. All right, I'm joined now by the comedian and political satirist Liz Winstead. She's the co-creator and former head writer of The Daily Show and the co-host of the podcast Feminist Buzzkills. Liz, thank you for being here because I want to talk about the broader implications of this. A lot of time and it's worthy time of people celebrating Stephen Colbert and the success of his show, what a big deal it was. But for many of us, it goes well beyond that. Whether you've ever watched Stephen Colbert or liked him or liked Jimmy Kimmel or don't, there's something at play here that should alarm all Americans.
Yes, that white men are finally getting a comeuppance. No, that is not it. When people are afraid, and when the powerful are afraid of those who challenge their power, to me, the message is, how did you get your power? It wasn't through intelligence, thoughtfulness, strategy. It was through some other thing that feels very, very weak. And that when that can be so, take somebody to the point of, I must destroy my detractors.
Right.
That's really the thing that I think is so scary. And, you know, I wrote an article for Rolling Stone when the announcement came out.
Right.
And one thing I wanted to remind people is that for years, people who you have never heard of, women, black folks, queer folks who have been doing political comedy, have been sidelined forever by people, promotional radio stations, local TV shows who were like, oh, you're too controversial, right? And so it's elevated now up to this point, and that's the part that I think feels really scary.
So one can say Donald Trump is thin-skinned. He doesn't like people who make fun of him. But this is much more serious, because if you offer yourself out for public office or journalism or whatever, any of us who are out there in the world, you accept the deal that I am out there, and 100% of people are not going to like me or my show or what I do or what I look like.
I've said that a million times. We were talking earlier, where I was just like, whenever I talk to folks about comedy or people wanting to go into comedy, or I'm terrified to put myself out there, it's like, it's very freeing to do a reset for yourself, to understand not everyone's going to like you. If you actually think that is your goal, you will be disappointed and paralyzed forever. There's people that don't like chocolate or babies. So it's kind of like, that's freeing.
Right.
You know, and so when it passes your lips, the only guarantee you have for yourself is that you believe it and that you can defend it. And if the naysayers come after you, the only assessment I ever make is, do they have a point on how I presented? If I agree and it's like, okay, my bad. But if I really have conviction about what I'm saying, I'll stand up for it.
Right.
That's it. It goes out of your lips and into the interpretation of everybody else. And that's what makes it exciting, quite frankly.
I want to point out an observation that Judy Berman made in Time on Friday. She said, given the political context, it makes sense that so much of the discussion around the Late Show's cancellation has focused on the dire implications for free speech, especially when that speech isn't as lucrative as it used to be. Mainstream platforms for humor that skewer the powerful are disappearing. And with each one we lose, the likelihood that abuses of power will go unnoticed by those who don't actively consume news grows. This is a huge issue, because there are people who don't watch us, but they will watch Colbert, they will watch Jon Stewart, they will watch John Oliver, and a number of other people, and they will actually get interpretations of the news, which are very sophisticated in many cases. These guys will write themselves off as comics, but in fact, this is very sophisticated. As mainstream news narrows, we need satire, we need comedy, we need cartoonists.
Yes, we do. And not only will I hit the drumbeat, we need to support the independent platforms with which they can thrive. We need to support them so much so that they can actually surround themselves with the team that makes them great. And that's the point that I think that no one's hitting a lot, which is with Colbert or John Oliver, Daily Show.
There's a team.
There's a team, and that team brings checks and balances. It doesn't create another demagogue. You know, sure, you can have people who have great podcasts that are one person driving it home and they don't have the resources to really make that balance of voice. But it's that team that helps somebody rethink, reshape, and bring other voices also within the totality of it being important and effectual, right?
So we're in a world where we are seeing, and it's very hard for us to believe, we are seeing what exactly Donald Trump says and his acolytes say working. Right. They make a threat, they tell somebody your merger's threatened or your license is threatened, and then things actually happen. What do viewers do about this? What do content consumers, how do you fight this? I mean, do you cancel your subscriptions to these companies that allow this to happen? What do you do?
it's so hard because we're talking about it in the sort of FCC, Brendan Carr, large thing, right? But when you look at our secondary markets that we've relied on, but great, YouTube is doing this, and you're seeing people being shadow banned, people being censored on the secondary places that we have to give the information. So I honestly, Allie, don't know the answer. I do think that the boycott helped when it came to people canceling Paramount. You know, I think that
on
really,
the Kimmel side, on Disney and ABC, that seemed to have an influence.
And I think it did. But where do we go if the secondary platforms are also saying things like, on the grander scale, too, when it comes to even information gathering and people truth telling? So I think supporting specific shows, you know, I think being very vocal
I think you have
on
to be
your
vocal.
platforms.
I think that's right. You have to tell
Right?
people. I always tell people, don't protest without telling anybody what you protest. Like if you're canceling your subscription, make sure they know why you're canceling.
That's exactly correct. And I think it's really important also to, as, you know, when John Oliver decided to do his show on HBO, you know, he made a decision, I think, to say, I'm going to be funny. I'm also going to have a point. I'm also going to give you a call to action. And I'm going to do that on a network not called Comedy Central because it gives me license to do all that in a stew. And I also think that as people are moving forward with deciding, I want to do political material, I want to do social commentary, adding that aspect to empower your viewer, your fan, your listener
You're
is
100%.
crucial.
That's necessary. People want that information.
Yeah.
To the extent that we can provide it, we shall. Great to see you, Liz, as always.
Great to see you. Thanks.
Liz Winstead is the co-creator and former head writer of The Daily Show.